Uh, Hello, everybody. I'm very pleased once again speaking to Konstantin from inside Russia. Konstantin is a very interesting partner to speak with, and I'm so pleased to have you once again on the channel. Welcome, Konstantin.
Thank you very much, Christoph. Pleasure to be here.
Yes, by the way, my name is Christoph Müller. I make videos for supporting Ukraine and democracy and freedom here on YouTube. And if you like to support this channel, please give a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Consider to become a channel member. That's new for me. I have never started to monetize somehow, but it has to be because it takes a lot of time. Konstantin, you know that you have been demonetized by YouTube. Will you tell our audience also about that? What happened there?
I don't know. They demonetized all Russian-based creators, which at the time I was not Russia-based. They demonetized me regardless, and they've been denying my remonetization. And this is a very odd situation. I applied a few times to get remonetized, and I followed all the procedures of YouTube. I know them quite well. I've set up a company, well, in the United States for quite some
Mm.
time.
Wow.
I've set up a brand new Google AdSense just as Google recommended, and they keep on denying me. And
That's
some
very sad.
people inside Google, the insiders, tried to help me and failed. And they're saying, Konstantin, something's very odd going on in our company because
This,
we don't know how to fix this, how to resolve.
this
I
is
believe there are Russian interests inside Google working covertly against me and probably against some other YouTubers.
that is really sad, and because you are such a fantastic voice for freedom, democracy, and against dictatorship, and you are an expert. You have about, I think, 490,000 followers or something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah, it's difficult, but we spreading the message. And in Russia, internet is blocked. But I hear also different things. I hear from people who say, no, there's internet. What's going on in Russia right now? Please tell us more.
Um, when we, look at the situation in Russia, we must always keep in mind that Russia is not universal, meaning all people in Russia are in different circumstances, in different conditions. For example, majority of Russians are poor. Quite a few of Russians, over 20% of the population, they're poor to the point where they really have hard time affording food. But can we say that all Russians are poor? No, because some they are enjoying themselves, benefiting from the war, making lots of money. Those who are part of Putin's system are rewarded handsomely.
Hmm.
Okay, and it goes to every area of Russia's life, and including internet. There are some people who are still enjoying the internet because they have special accounts that the government doesn't touch. I know that for sure.
Uh-huh.
And there are some people that just regular folks that still have internet, but because of technical difficulties, Roskomnadzor cannot block entire population of Russia simultaneously. And they don't have that many resources. They start blocking Telegram massively, then some people start having access to WhatsApp because Roskomnadzor currently does not have the capacity to block everything. But they're working. They're working on it. They're beefing up their resources. They Moscow is blocked. The center of Moscow, nothing is working
Wow.
except for a few selected chosen people. Okay, if you know what I mean.
Hmm.
They have special providers, special accounts, and yes, they're working. They're high up in Putin's hierarchy. I also heard that KGB has access to internet, no problem. They're forbidden to use Russian messengers, by the way. They only use Telegram,
Wow.
WhatsApp. Yeah,
They're forbidden to use
they're forbidden
Russian
Macs.
message.
They're forbidden to install Macs. It's Macs is their product. They know it quite well. They are forbidden to install Macs on their phones. Um, Macs is such a terrible raw product that it's really easy to hack and get access of anyone's phone through Macs. So the KGB is designed Macs so they know, so they use in Telegram, and their Telegram works. All their communications work. So people who say that there's still internet in Russia are right. Partially, yes. If I were to describe the situation, I'd say there's a chaos going on right now. There are many key decision makers, and not key, but the decision makers, they try to make different decisions, and there's one body of the government in charge of blockings, and it's having a hard time to, follow all the orders. But I am also absolutely sure that very soon, within months, if this continues, they will get to a point where they will have enough resources to block everything efficiently.
Yeah. So,
I have a good analogy.
yeah, tell
The
me.
USSR, you remember the USSR was a
Sure.
completely closed country. It was under the Iron Curtain, right?
Yeah.
Could you tell back then that the USSR completely closed country?
If I, as a German, could tell that, you mean?
Yes. Yeah. If they asked you in
I,
Germany, as a
I,
German, said, do you think that the USSR is completely blocked off from the world?
I could say so, but not completely. There are some special people like Olympia participants, or yeah, they had the
Members
chance.
of Politburo. Mikhail Gorbachev, when he was just not the general secretary, but just, the big boss inside the Communist Party, but not quite the biggest, he enjoyed going to Nice with his wife. That's where they vacationed,
Yes.
okay? So you can't really say that the USSR was a completely closed
No,
country.
no
There were
special
people,
special people could travel as they were like.
exactly, and even regular people could travel, but they would need to get passport first, and then they would need to get an exit visa, and there would be steps to take. Okay, they would have to be approved. They would have to be trustworthy of
For the system.
for the state, for the system. Yes. So the same thing will happen. Russia is not inventing the bicycle, reinventing the wheel. Russia is using the Soviet system because it's run by the KGB, Soviet KGB. They're using the same blueprints, okay? And that's what they're going to do. They're going to close the country, close internet, close everything for most people, but the selected few, they'll be free to use communications, to use bank accounts, to use to leave the country as they wish, and so forth.
So I have a cousin who is very positively, let's say it like that, in his mind towards Russia. And this guy says, yeah, I have never heard about that because I have a good friend in Moscow. I'm talking to him regularly, and he's no problems with the internet. Can I assume that this friend in Moscow of my cousin, he is a special KGB guy,
Not
perhaps?
necessarily. No, if the special KGB people never say anything.
Never
You
say.
don't know who they are. Okay, that's their training. They keep very low profile. They smile all the time. They never conflict with you. They never show their special document. The ksiva, the red book. They don't do that. They are completely different. Okay,
Mm,
so the guy might have internet, but he might not live inside like the Moscow. If you look at the map of Moscow, it's a circle. It's like an egg shape,
yeah.
and inside this Kremlin and all the prestigious areas and all the government agencies, and that's where the internet is blocked. But now there's a special access for Russian Parliament, for the KGB HQ, obviously for the Kremlin. They must have some kind of like special systems. And if you look on the outskirts of Moscow, there are some areas where internet, still there. Then I've experienced it firsthand. Sometimes they turn on WhatsApp access and sometimes they turn it off. For example, after business hours, sometimes it is possible to use WhatsApp. People called me on WhatsApp without VPNs, okay? And during the working hours, they usually block WhatsApp. So it's weird. That's what I'm saying. It's chaos right now. Okay, you might have internet today, you might not have it tomorrow, or it's unpredictable.
Yeah. But let's speak about the reason. Why do the Russians, why does Moscow, why does Putin do this incredible measure and block the internet for vast parts of the population? What could be behind that?
You got to understand that what I'm about to say is speculations. Okay,
Of
it's my
course,
personal opinion.
of course.
I believe that there are two major factors in play right now.
Mm.
First factor is massive. It's Russian state is at the point where it is collapsing, and the collapse is happening at a very fast speed. The economy is landsliding. Every single week, tens of thousands of small businesses closing their doors. People start complaining openly. People start, communicating with the world, describing their situations. On my channel, I show quite a lot of videos from regular business owners, what they think of current situation. And that's the most true information you can get from the ground, from regular people, right? When they say, well, I have a flower shop and my sales are nearly zero for the entire month of March, and they dropped 50% in February compared to January. That's the information we can trust. And a lot of anger happening, a lot of events in Russia that will create and are creating now social unrest. For example, more and more federal employees start facing situation where they getting paid with delays.
Yeah.
So federal employees don't get paid anymore.
Wow.
They eventually they will, but there are delays because there's no money in the provincial and the federal budgets for them. Now, there's a very odd situation happening in Siberia right now, Novosibirsk, Omsk provinces, where small farmers, the state comes in and slaughters their cows without explanation, saying your cow is sick, without taking tests, without providing any paperwork authorizing such slaughter.
I heard about that, about the cow slaughtering. That is
Yes,
weird too.
it's creating a huge unrest, and not just among farmers, not just among people in Novosibirsk province, all over Russia. It's basically Russian people saying, you know what, the state has declared the war on us.
Mm.
And what is the easiest way to communicate between people? Internet,
Hmm.
messengers, Telegram, WhatsApp. That's two most commonly used messengers in Russia. But you can use other messengers as well. So what they do, they shut messengers down. It's called breaking horizontal ties between people. And that's what they're doing. They're afraid that they know the situation will get much worse. It's not around the corner. It's happening now. Within weeks, months, okay, things will get much worse. They know people will get so much angry. They're afraid of people organizing, communicating with each other. They're trying to break up those methods of communications. That's reason number one. And reason number two, I think Vladimir Putin is very afraid for his personal safety. I think that there's some information that we are not aware of, but the signs kind of show that there are some people inside Russian political establishment that are not very happy with Putin, and perhaps some people in the military. And he's very afraid, perhaps even some in the KGB. And then he's trying to shut down communications to slow down their means of communicating of, let's say, conspirators, the people who conspire against him.
Mm.
Now, the fewer ways they have, the easier it is to eavesdrop on them. Okay, if you have like 6 or 7 messengers in your phone, it's really much more difficult to monitor what you say and who you talk to. Only if you have one provider that is 100% traffic is monitored, and you have one messenger, it becomes so much easier to control you. So I think the second reason that internet is getting shut down selectively is that Putin is afraid for his safety.
Oh
There's
wow.
something is going on.
Something is going on, and another reason, what is also sometimes often called that nowadays, because the SMO, special military operation, the war in Ukraine is going so badly for Russia, that they now want to make a mobilization, and that people could become upset. What's your take on that?
Mobilization hasn't stopped. It started in on September 23rd of 2022, and it hasn't stopped. Putin was specifically asked to sign the order to end mobilization after 320,000 people were mobilized and the goal was met. And he said, no, it's not necessary. So mobilization has been going on, not acute phase, but slow phase. And they are mobilizing here in Tashkent. Every couple of weeks, a story comes up from some people someone knows in Russia, that their relatives, neighbor, family member, was mobilized. So it's happening slowly but surely. And on top of that, they are recruiting a lot of people, paying them lots of money, sign-up bonuses. And they have just started mobilizing the active reservists. There's active reserve in Russia. Basically, men sign up, and used to that by law they could not be used in a war, and they cannot be stationed outside Russia. So basically, the idea was if someone invaded Russia, then all these men would be called up and go and defend the country. Well, now they changed the law. Now they can be placed outside Russia in Ukraine, and you don't need a war to do that. You just need special military operation will do. Okay, so that's a new law, and there are 2 million reservists. There, they started mobilizing the reservists November 2nd, I believe, and this mobilization has been going on. So you're talking about massive mobilization, just like it
I I was talking about
started
that.
in September 2022. I don't believe that's going to happen anytime soon, because that will be a huge stress for Putin himself. There's a great risk that people would revolt, and then I think that's a weapon of last resort for him. If he announces the big mobilization, we know that things are just, they're nowhere to get worse, because they're at the bottom.
This is the as we know, Putin, since he's in power since 25 years, he's been always a guy who provokes wars, who wages wars. Chechnya, then later on Georgia, Abkhazia. So I don't have to tell all that to you, but always when it's going bad for Putin, then he escalates on another level. And so, do you see any new escalation on the horizon, which could be very near?
If you asked me, let's say last fall, I would say yes. And I was talking to Jonathan Fink, and we were discussing a possibility of Russia invading the Baltic states.
Hmm.
I believe it was October. And back then, the situation was possible. Now, I would say that it's extremely improbable, because Russian army is having a hard time keeping the land that it stole from Ukraine. They're not moving anywhere. Russian propaganda used to be so vocal about the victories of Russian army, saying, "Oh, Ukraine is going to fall very soon. We are moving fast into Ukraine. We take, town by town by town, and we're victorious." soon, and it'll be over very soon.
Yeah.
Of course, it was a lie, but at least they could justify that lie somehow. Now they can't even justify lies, so they're basically silent about that.
But
Putin was talking about Kupiansk, or Kupiansk is ours. Well, Kupiansk is Ukrainian, and that's what 5 months later, and they've shut up as if they never talked about Russian military victories. Now, they are falling apart at the front. They no way they could just escalate. They on
see,
paper, of course they could. Of course they could use
see,
words nuclear weapons and all of that, but in reality, no.
yeah, Konstantin, this is absolutely from our standpoint, absolutely ridiculous and illogical that he would escalate more because it's going so badly in Ukraine and the Russian army is so pathetic and desperate. They have no chance, absolutely no chance. But Putin himself, as I said, he always escalates when he's trapped in the corner. We know that, and I'm hinting. I try to hint on the Narva scenario, the so-called Narva scenario, which would be that they would make an incursion in Narva, the Estonian city, which is populated by 75% of Russians, who would, by the way, want to be Estonians. They don't want to be separatists. But it was the same thing in Donbass, the Donbass scenario. All of a sudden, there were separatists and they were controlled by Russians. And then, yeah, many people believe that there were separatists. I know in Germany, I met a lot of people who did not have a clue that these are Russian puppets and that they are not separatists. And so the Narva scenario, from my point of view, is probable, not just to conquer the land, no, but to attack a NATO country. And this NATO country would be attacked and nobody would do anything against it because they would start to discuss, is this a war, is not a war, is it hybrid, it's not hybrid, and nobody would do anything, especially not Donald Trump. And the NATO, they would dissolve. NATO becomes from this point on useless, and that is a very probable scenario from my point of view because Putin hates NATO and he wants to get rid of it, and this would be a very tough strike on NATO.
What if you're wrong? What if NATO doesn't back down?
I
What if they
hope so.
strike back?
I hope so to be wrong. Yes, I just say this is a probable scenario. I'm not sure if NATO really will not react. But as far as I know NATO up to now, and I know my compatriots and my German Bundeschancellor Merz, who has still not delivered towers, I see that up to now they have never really strongly reacted. Maybe I'm too pessimistic here.
The war in Ukraine is one thing. It's not part of NATO. Ukraine is not part of NATO. And attacking a NATO country is the exact reason NATO exists, to protect NATO members. Article 5 would be invoked immediately. And, we came close to a conflict with NATO. I mean, I shouldn't say we, Russia came close to the conflict with NATO back in late 2022, I believe, when there was a missile, unidentified missile, flew into Poland, about 3 kilometers into Poland, and fell into some kind of a storage facility full of hay and killed a Polish farmer.
I remember.
And that immediately, remember that. And then immediately it was, and Russians were the first ones who started publicly reaching out and saying, it was us, it wasn't us, it wasn't us. There was panic in the Kremlin. I remember the first hours, panic in the propaganda said, it's not us, we're being framed, it's not us. They were definitely afraid of NATO taking that as an act of war. Okay. And I don't think that anything's changed since then. Only things gotten worse for Russia because its resources, military resources, absolutely depleted. What are they gonna do in Narva? You think they roll in with tanks, and then what if they get resistance from NATO countries. What are they going to do? Go back, like roll back to Russia?
I hope so that they would get resistance, but yeah, I mean, Putin, always, every action he has done was a big risk for him. Invading Crimea, how would NATO react in this moment? Yeah, because they don't react because it's
Zero
not
risk.
zero
Zero
risk
risk.
because it's not NATO, you
I
mean?
believe. Of course. Of course. It's been a very well planned operation and it worked according to Putin's plan 100%.
Hmm.
Now, Ukraine is where it went wrong, that when he invaded in 2022. But Crimea was
But now
perfectly executed military operation.
yeah, circumstances are very good for Putin to attack NATO because there's Donald Trump, the president of the United States, the leading nation of NATO. And Donald Trump does everything to undermine the pillar of credibility. So, I mean, it's not so easy and not so
When it comes to Donald Trump, none of us can say anything because Donald Trump says one thing in the morning and he contradicts himself in the afternoon, and then he says completely different thing, in the evening. So we shouldn't. I don't know what to tell you about Trump.
yeah.
Can he make a deal with Putin saying, hey, you know what? The United States is going to act on Russia's side. Let's get NATO countries together because I don't like them. Is this possible? In the past, I would have told you, I would say, it's absolutely impossible. Now, business as usual. Yeah, the United States turning against NATO countries.
Hmm. Ah.
We've seen stranger things, okay?
So, okay, in our last talk, you have been using the image of the Titanic, that Russia is like the Titanic. People are sitting on board and drinking their champagne, and it has already hit the iceberg. The sinking is coming inevitably. How do you see the Russian state and the Russian economy? How fast can this happen that the collapse is there?
Weeks,
Weeks?
months, perhaps months. Yes, it's there. It's taken a very slow path, 4 years, well, 3.5 years, really. Russia had lots of reserves. I usually try to break it down and give very simple example analogy. Let's say there's a household. You earn 100,000 euro per year, okay, and you spend 80,000. You cover your rent, your vacations, you live modest life, good life, and then you take 20,000 euro and you keep it in your savings account. And you do so year after year after year. And then after 20 years, you have, 100,000, 400,000 euro saved in your savings account. Lots of money. You earn interest, life is good. And all of a sudden, you go to your work and your boss says, you know what? You gotta work more now, more hours, but we're gonna pay you less, twice as little.
Mhm.
And you can't leave because there's a new law. You must work. There's enemies all around our company, whatever. And you come back home and you tell to your wife, said, honey, that's we certainly, we're spending 80,000 euro and then we're only going to be making 50 per year. And the wife says, you know what? Let's live it up. Heck, we've been, limiting ourselves for so long, and you see what happened. You know, let's start eating out in expensive restaurants. Let's buy a new car or second car, convertible. Let's vacation all over the world. And you start doing that. You start going crazy. You start spending 140,000 euro per year, okay, or 150. And then you have enough money in your bank to cover the difference, right? So, and you do that year after year, you're having a good time, you spend so much more than before, so much more than you earn. But then the day comes when you go to your bank account and
Yeah.
the teller says, you know what?
Uh,
Your account is at zero. What do you do then? You go, oh, shoot, I didn't think of it. Now what do we do? We don't know. The Russia is at that moment zero. There's no money left. It had a very nice savings account. Half of the savings are still frozen in Europe and Belgium, okay? And then 320 billion dollars, 300 billion euro. And they had another 300 billion that they have spent over the years supporting the war because war is expensive. Now they are at zero. Now we're seeing now the biggest sign so far, well, actually two, is first, federal employees not getting paid.
Wow.
Second sign, Russian people are so desperate for money, they don't have money to buy food. So they take their belongings, they go to the streets, they put newspapers or sheets on the ground, and they put their belongings on the ground on sidewalks and sell them. The flea markets, okay? I saw them in early 90s when Russia was transforming from socialism to capitalism. It was very hard time. No one knew what was going on, how to live. But then, year by year, Russians learned new ways. Russians started working, doing businesses, and so forth. That changed. Now it's back to that point, 1992. That's where the situation is. So, answering your question, not next year, not at the end of the year. Now, it's happening now.
So this is
They're not drinking champagne on Titanic anymore.
wow. So this is tough. That means we're facing a very huge event coming from Russia very soon. I personally hope so too, because I don't want to stand this any longer, and the Ukrainians also don't want. But what will happen then to Russia? What will happen to Putin? Will he survive that? And
No,
who will become the successor of him?
Putin is on the way out. There's no question about that. Putin is done. It's just a matter of time. Who is the successor? I don't know. No one does. There will be a huge power fight, and perhaps it has already begun. We don't know. The signs are there. Shoigu clan, the power that the political clans are fighting, and the Shoigu clan, the clan of the generals, has lost the battle. It's basically been destroyed. The only person, the head of the clan, is Shoigu. All his people are in prison, either under investigation or convicted to very lengthy terms. That is a sign of power struggle. Now, internet outages also could be a sign of power struggles going on in Moscow right now. Putin missing for 2 weeks, that's certainly the sign of power struggle, because Putin is just afraid to show up in public. He's afraid to be assassinated. There's no question about that. So quite a few signs. We don't know who. Usually the successor is the person that no one really has heard of. Just like Putin became the successor of Boris Yeltsin. Who knew of Putin 3-4 months before he became the president? No one. Okay.
Yeah.
So you can't have a head or a representative of one of the clans become the president, because that's absolute power. The clans will have to decide on someone, and that someone most likely will be not very powerful. There will be another Putin born. Okay, so they'll try to put a weak person, very controlled person, and control by many clans. Okay, so that they'll try to keep the balance of power on.
Very interesting. Do you think that the Russian Empire the Russian Federation will consist, or do you think it will break apart into
It's
some
breaking
different?
apart. It's breaking. There's no question about that. It's breaking. We're seeing right now the end of Russian Empire. I thought, I was young and naive. I thought that the Russian Empire fell apart in 91, but no such luck. It has lived all these years, and right now, we're seeing the final stages of the falling of the empire.
You know, this scenario is for many people in Germany, especially a horror scenario. They are afraid of Russia falling apart. They say, yeah, lose nukes, and so on. Criminal clans take over. Criminality will rise. Now with Putin, we know what we have. We have stability. It's an evil guy, but it's stable. That's a lot of people talking like that. Is for you, is this an advantage, Russia breaking apart, or would it be a catastrophe?
It's not, it's going to be a natural way of things. And I understand where you're coming from, the Germans, and I find it a wrong position. It's a weak position. What you needed to strike Russia down hard and fast. And now it would be a different country, peaceful one, not the one who poses threat of nuclear bombings, and that's what they brag about. We need to wipe the Germany out of the map. That's what Russian officials and propaganda say. They've said it many times. That's what you have right now for being cowardice, for being inactive, for being weak, for trying to appease Putin. You can't appease mafia. You can't appease gangsters. You need to strike them down. You have failed. Now you might have a catastrophe on your hands in the future because of your actions. Okay, not just Germany, but Europe combined in the United States. So will it be a catastrophe? I don't know, but that's going to be a mess inside Russia. Will they be loose nukes? Most likely not, because who needs loose nukes? Who? I need money. If I'm like a boss in Rostov, I know very serious people in Rostov from the 90s, okay? They don't need nukes. They don't need to pose a threat to the USA, to Israel, to... You see, if there's a local, Don takes control of Rostov province, all he needs is to hang on to his power, to have security, personal security and safety, and to have a steady flow of money coming in. He needs to fly to Germany on vacations. He needs to be accepted in Germany. And then once he takes nukes and start posing a threat to Germany or the United States, well, guess what? A rocket will fly and take out his family within minutes. Okay, so I don't believe in this theory of loose nukes. Okay, because no one needs loose nukes. They need money. They need power, but not,
Konstantin,
to keep nukes in their heads.
I thank you so much for these very fierce and strong words, and I totally agree. By the way, I felt a little bit uncomfortable when you say you, and I'm a German, and but I know you didn't mean me, because I have no power to decide anything. But I totally agree with you. It's a big mistake to support the Putin mafia regime and say, now we know what we have, we don't know what we get when they collapse. I personally also think it's a good thing that when Russia will not stay as it is and collapses and becomes will fall apart. That's what then they would not be any...
I didn't mean you personally.
I know,
So,
I know.
But you know what? You also hold responsibility a little bit, just as I, Russian, hold responsibility for my government's actions, because I am the holder of power, and you are. We are. We just allow government to represent us. And if all of us stand up and say, hey, you know what? Let's get the hell out of here. You're not representing us right. Then there's nothing the government can do. So a little bit of each one of us responsibility is there in the actions, but I did not mean you personally.
Yeah, sure.
Your actions.
But I think, no, of course, that was, but overthrowing a government, you have to be careful with that too, because I
did not call for overthrowing. I called there are democratic means of changing the government. That you don't have to rebel.
Yes, but
use violence. But
yeah, good. So we in Germany, we have now this weird party called AfD, Alternative für Deutschland, which is a Putin puppet. And they come into parliament.
That is a very known party in Russia, by the way. The Russian friends.
Absolutely.
They love that party. They just they say, well, see,
and
this
it is
finally normal Germans in Germany.
And it is dangerous when we would get a government from them. They are rising and rising and rising despite being pro-Russian. This is very dangerous. So the democracy can be also toppled from inside, and that is also a very dangerous development. And that's why we are talking here to counter this. AfD.
That's why we're sitting here and having a conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Konstantin, for talking to me today. And I hope we can continue this another time. Oh, and a very important thing I didn't mention. I wanted to talk with you also about your faith, about God, but maybe not in this talk here because this will take too long. But I think this is a very important issue because we are not alone here on Earth.
That's for sure.
You believe in God. I do this too, and we need also the divine support and the divine leadership, and also the prayer.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about it next time.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for this talk, Konstantin. All the best to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Pleasure. Bye-bye.